Hello, traveler. Have you ever wondered about the history of the Sultan of Mahrahn? No? Well, that's too bad. Today, I'm going to take you on a history tour. Here we go. This is the city of Calabaz. It stands as the world's hub for trade and commerce thanks to its strategic position on the coast, as well as its variety of shops for all to visit. Its rich history and beautiful architecture helps it to stand out as the capital of the Sultanate, as well as the southwest of Kauramont as a whole. But how did we get here? Well, I can tell you. It started a long time ago, before even I walked in the sand. During this time, the aristocracy of Isidore ruled over a majority of the eastern lands in Kauramont, as well as owning colonies elsewhere, such as the south in the Mendoza region. But even with all of their wealth and power, they could never tame the wildlands. Due to the red-hot sands, as well as the untraversable Mason Mountains, it made for a perfect land for any bandits and rogue nomads to raid. It's speculated that many of these bandits hailed from the Sultanate of Al-Shamira. The constant raiding of Shamirans on the Isidorian trade vessels and caravans led the two nations to a boiling point. Eventually, it was decided that a diplomatic marriage was in order to put an end to the rogue bandits. This led to the wedding of the Sultan of Al-Shamira, Samir, and Maria, the head of governments and a wealthy aristocrat within Isidore. The alliance allowed Isidore and Al-Shamira to jointly control the coast of an important river cutting through the wildlands, allowing trade to flow freely for the first time here. Surprisingly, their marriage blossomed, leading to the birth of their child, Al-Abad Javier, or Javier for short. That's me. They smothered him with riches and love until tragedy struck. As Samir and Maria were traveling by carriage to the north for a ceremony, bandits had attacked and stolen all that was in the carriage, including their lives. As quickly as the bandits had came, they had fled the scene, and left the entire caravan of troops, riches, and the leaders of both nations dead. Javier's parents' death is believed to have been the beginning of the turnover. It's a very complicated event that is tied to the Besm religion of the Betlari. All you need to know is that every 1,000 years the Betlari will roll into a ball to rest and protect itself from the predators in his own world. When the Betlari rolls into his ball, he can no longer keep the peace and protect the people who live upon his back, resulting in a collapse of civilization. The deaths of Samir and Maria resulted in a collapse of both the aristocracy of Isidore and the Sultanate of Al-Shamira. With the lack of any state powerful enough to maintain order, the world went dark. Isidore's last-ditch effort to quell any rebellions and put an end to the bandits was constructing a fort and placing a large garrison of troops in it. It was built at the mouth of the Laturian River. They sent to the fort General Martineau, as he was one of the top military leaders still alive during this time. The troops under Martineau fought off the best they could. Unfortunately, the lack of supplies and constant sieges caused many to either die of starvation or murder by the hands of the rebels. During all of this, Javier hid within the city of Bellara, the once capital of Al-Shamira. Knowing he was the heir to the throne, and was given what remained of the Isidorian and Shamirian wealth and lineage, he knew he was one of the biggest targets for bandits. For the unseeable future, Javier hid amongst the people of Bellara, living in a dark and unforgiving world. 19 years later, Javier re-emerged and proclaimed himself the heir to the throne of Shamira. Through those 19 years, the world slowly recovered to a point where he thought it was safe enough to declare the successor state to his father's nation. Using what was left of his parents' wealth, he traveled northwards to Fort Martinel and hired workers to repair it. From here, the foundations were laid for the capital city of Mahrahn, the city of Calabaz. Still overcoming the turnover's impact, Javier was still very fearful for his citizens' lives as well as his own. Because of this, he placed his nation under a strict isolation from the outside world. The city grew over time, but slowly began to feel the effects of the isolation. One night, as Javier was overlooking his port, a group of ragged fishermen docked their boat and stepped onto the platform below. One of these men was Pablo Conriquez. He was a diplomat as well as a worker in many other professions. Due to the hurricane that recently struck Mendoza, they were looking for assistance in reconstruction, as well as protection from others. This meeting between Javier and Pablo led to the eventual alliance between the Mendoza Federation and the Sultan of Mahrahn. While the alliance benefited Mendoza greatly, as Mahrahn began to export building materials and other tools to assist in their construction efforts, the isolation of Mahrahn began to take its toll. The trade and alliance between the two nations wasn't enough for Mahrahn to find stability in its economy. This, mixed in with the overfishing of Calabas's coral reefs, resulted in the near collapse of Javier's nation, as many people cried out for help as they began to either starve or run out of money to pay for basic necessities. Javier walked out of his throne room to see a peaceful protest near the town center, as the people of Mahrahn called out for a lift on the isolation. As he met with his viziers, they discussed in great detail of what may plague them if they don't make a change. Javier realized that his city was safer than ever before, as the construction of his outer wall was complete. He felt safe enough to step outside and speak to the people. He stated boldly that
سما يبيك واستمع إلي لدقة عريان الموفق مسل ولا مخصوصي علمي عم دخي ورتي علينا لم يعد يميل ولا عدخت المدان ماركمت ابن عزم مدينة مسينة في قرمانت ومدر فخ مدينة بشغنون أو زمي كافت لوريمي أهنجد المدينة خخ علن بعد أن إخمل لخات المدان أنا أول أستاذ لخاف قحط إلى الأمان من اليوم السارة استفخ أبواب المدان للخير.
in the coming days, the gates of Calabas were open to the world. Many foreigners from all over Kauramont came into the city, many of which have never even seen inside the city walls, let alone have been in the nation before. Javier took the crowd of people on a tour and auctioned off many of the buildings he has to be used by foreign companies as storefronts in order to bring stability back into the nation. This, along with open trade with the rest of the world, slowly restored the state of Mahrahn's economy, allowing Javier to breathe a quick sigh of relief. Just as the situation in Mahrahn became stable, outside of the nation a new ideology quickly took over by storm in many of the eastern nations. As the rise of Morism integrated itself into countless nations, they began to threaten the power balance in the world and began a conquest of others who weren't aligned with them. Javier offered refuge to anyone affected by the war and denounced the Moorists. This move led to Mahrahn being threatened to be invaded due to the offering of refuge by the Moorish leader himself. The tension in Kauramont was palpable and the world was on the brink of war. In the blink of an eye, the war ended. What ended up only being a war of espionage, where very little happened other than intelligence gathering on both sides and a few minor skirmishes here and there. Again, Javier breathed another sigh of relief as his nation was almost flung onto the world stage violently. Thankfully, things began to slow down after this. Javier, during this slow period, began an organization dedicated to rediscovering the lost history of Mahrahn. Much of what is known only scratches the surface of Shamira's, Mahrahn, and Isidor's long and arduous journeys. The most recent developments of the nation is the venture into Balara, the old city, to begin reconstruction on the Temple of the Betlari, as well as much of the city's ancient and decrepit infrastructure. While the political landscape of Mahrahn is slow right now, the construction and historical developments are ramping up. There's so much more to be done in Mahrahn, and so much more to come as well. If you want to be part of stories and events like the ones I just read to you now, then join the Janitors Closet SMP, a world-building server focused on roleplay, nations, conflict, and much more. Link in the description below. Until next time, guys.
I've lost count.